Hello, everyone. You have tuned into Reframing Notice, a TCHP podcast made possible by Reframe's Art Grant, Gender Realities 2.0. My name is Gumam Davidson, and I'll be your host for today. Our topics of discussion for today are queer friendships, visibilities, mobilizations, solidarities, and alliances. First, I speak with Samhita Barua about queer friendships, the idea of notice, solidarities, and alliances. Samhita is a queer person and educator at Tezpur University, Assam.
So, about me, I'm an educator now. I started off as a social worker in various organizations across India, starting with Assam and then in Madhya Pradesh, and also worked in northeastern states as well through Northeast Network. In fact, that was my entry into the whole context of Northeast. Okay, before this, as a student, as a child, it has been mostly Assam and Assam specific. But of course, going to Delhi and working as in studying and knowing about the northeastern context was another revelation. People used to say about, "Oh, Didi, aap to Indian lagti hai." Those type of comments, and then all these type of stereotypes about Northeast. Then explaining myself why I am, what is different about me or what is similar about me. Today, I feel I regret doing such explanations to mainland Indian friends, so-called friends, and so-called, uh, college mates, and all that. But it was a very different experience those days. When we were in the 90s, 97, we went to Delhi. And from 97 to 2002, I lived in Delhi 5 years. And that gave me an understanding of the kind of space that we claim or that we have when it comes to our context, whether it is Assam, whether it is Meghalaya, whether it is Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, or Sikkim. These are the rainbow republics, I should say, who have been very fascinating. And since then, my romance with the rainbow republic started. And always had this dream that have to do something here, have to be here somehow. Even if I am outside, I was working in Madhya Pradesh or I was studying in Delhi or whatever, always at the back of my mind, I always had this, that I need to come back. I need to come back, do something, that was the dream as a younger person and working and all that. So being queer is a very interesting context which has added a new dimension to my life, I should say, which I discovered way back in the 90s during my college time in Miranda House. That was the time when I was first attracted to women, and I realized that this is something which I would be homoromantic, maybe, those days. So this was a kind of experience, or I accepted myself that, all right, so that is my orientation. And that is something which kind of stayed with me since then. And that identity, of course, I was very closeted those days, extremely closeted. And this was the 90s. It was criminalized. There was so many stigma related to same-sex relationships, related to, HIV, AIDS. You can't imagine the kind of lives we have kind of gone through those days, the stigma within our families, the stigma about it, even to talk to friends about it, share something related to our preferences. I still remember telling some of my straight friends about my preference or my gender identity. And then they said, "Oh, now you'll have to make friends only from the queer community." And that was such an alienating feeling, I was like really shattered with that statement of a very close friend of mine. So those type of experiences I remember during my college days, and since then it has been a journey of self discovery and self acceptance also. That how do I locate myself, where do I see myself? My personal journey of gender and sexuality has been defined by different struggles of women's movement, being part of the women's movement, being part of field based organizations working in this field in the Northeast. So that way I should say a lot of myths were broken, a lot of identity related factors were taken care of. So that was a revelation also in many fronts. Okay. So this was the kind of experience that I had as a person. Then I started working in the media in the Deccan Herald newspaper in 2010. So when I worked there as a journalist, that then also that was a new world altogether as a media person. It was more of working with media houses, working with different issues, then writing about them, doing stories, all those type of things, learning the basically the trade in a different context. I'm somebody who would like to kind of experiment with life, experiment with various experiences, and take up creative projects, do different kinds of things. But at the same time, I'm also grounded and pulled all the time by family and then very close group of friends in the Northeast. So
You
that
know,
was
when you mentioned about mother before we even started chatting, I was like, okay, that's a very familial, homely context, and I was very curious also. Like, what's your rapport with her?
I used to always tell my mother, I think you are a lesbian, you really like me, and I like you. So we are the first partners. I used to always tell her, and she just doesn't like anybody. Like she's like so averse. I used to say that "Arey, you are too asexual. If you don't like men, you don't like women. If you have no attraction to anyone, so then you must be asexual." So I always used to tease her like that. Off late, of course, nowadays. But before that, yes, a very strong bond with my mother because she has been an inspiration for me in many ways. Someone who has been there, like if nobody calls, I know that she's going to call me at least once a day. She's going to be there always. She though doesn't. Well, she finds it very difficult to accept my chosen queer identity. She would always try to say, "Oh, you are always on denial. Oh, you are not like that. You should just wear some long earrings. You should just wear some earrings." She would push me to do that. She, even though explaining to her many times about my preference, about my orientation, about my gender identity, everything, like I have been sharing all these things also of late, last 2 years at least, consistently I have been sharing with my parents, both my parents.
we
In
haven't we haven't had the privilege of listening to your sharings as intimate as your parents have had the privilege, because they stay with you, they're closer to you. So I just want to know, for myself, and in case, for the larger community folks out there, how do you define yourself? Who do you think you are?
fascinating, as I said. Maybe I was this, maybe I was that. I am rediscovering every layer by layer these days. But I have a trans man gender expression. That is where I locate myself. And I think I am homoromantic. I think that is how it has been from childhood, having crushes over, different women of different age groups, like within my closed circles of friends and family, like that. So that has been very strong. Mostly friends, people in my friendship circles are there, but mostly these are straight women, and they are women who have got their own preferences and all. And sometimes I would also think that, because I might be sapiosexual or cupiosexual also, I'm not sure, because sometimes some people I met, say, after 10 years or 15 years, and as a child I had a crush on someone, and then when I meet them after that long period, then I don't have that same feeling towards that same person, so it was like that. So I have tried to analyze my own position and how the spectrum accepts me, or I accept the spectrum. That has been a constant journey of revelation. I do not feel like being in one particular box. I do not feel like being stereotyped into one category alone, but I feel that I am, somewhere my position is very blur in the context of being asexual, being autosexual also. I have explored my body myself, and I feel most comfortable with myself. So that has been my experience, even though having a serious romantic committed relationship with a woman, even for more than 12 years, but still somehow, somewhere, I always feel that, somewhere maybe asexuality or autosexuality is something which is the most preferred orientation which I might be having, and that is something that I have thought of in a way. But regarding, say, being fluid or non-binary, that has been an agenda politically also, contextualizing the diversity in terms of gender and sexuality in my understanding or in my ways of dealing with my immediate ecology. I guess that is something which I'm still trying to grapple with. I'm still trying to engage with that. How do I understand? And everything changed the moment I started questioning. Every relationship changed, friendships broke, a lot of intimate friendships also changed. Then
My friendship with
family.
you hasn't changed, right?
Oh, yeah, of
I
course,
I
of
think I think
course.
it's growing very slowly, like very slowly.
We just met during the Pride last year, and that's
Yeah,
how.
but I am very happy and confident where with the dynamics that we share, we haven't spoken so much. At the same time, we have known each other for quite a long time.
First time I met you in anything, you were doing a lecture there.
Yeah, back in 2017, 18, I think.
Yes, sometime that time. And then we met during the Pride last year. So
I
that's
remember you asked a very interesting question. I tried to give a very interesting answer. So somewhere I think we had that dynamics which had the potential to grow. The fact that I wanted to speak to you about this was also because of that potential to grow or build that friendship. For me, also at the same time to also learn a certain, let's say, lived experience which is not mine. Something which is different from me, which I get to see from you. And as you mentioned about fluidity and ever changing, ever evolving notions of gender expression and orientation, I think I'm very interested to hear from someone like you with such a fluid or evolving idea of oneself. What does the region even mean to you? What does Northeast India even mean to you? Because that's something that we are trying to engage with, especially from queer, trans, or otherwise non-conforming folks.
for me, Northeast is home, and Northeast is a very, satellite idea. It's a satellite idea from outside mostly, and it's clubbed idea. Okay, it's an idea for connecting the eight sisters. It's an idea for putting together a cluster, a sub-region, a kind of geopolitically very, very sensitive zone. That is something which has been our orientation when we got to learn about it since the 90s, right? It is conflict ridden, it is this, it is that. There are problems, it is very scary. These were the notions. But when I started communicating, when I started having people to people connect, when I started visiting different states, when I started building relationships, and these relationships are working relationships, some are really deep rooted friendships, and friendships which goes beyond work, friendship which goes beyond language, friendships which goes beyond age, beyond ethnicity, beyond even gender. I think these friendships are lifelong, and these are the most inspiring friendships that I've discovered in the Northeast, and I continue to do that. And that is something which gives me that hope, the hope to coexist with our differences, with the diversity that we have, and we have to celebrate that. And that is something what I look at Northeast in its own flavor, every flavor, whether it is Iromba in Manipur, or it is Akhuni in Nagaland, or it is Sukahak or Mestatenga in Boroland. I love food. I just want to explore, various tastes and flavors, and food really connected me to the Northeast. Okay, because I was doing food stories for the Center for Science and Environment in 2016, 15, 16. So those days, that is how I started connecting also with Naga Hills, and started exploring different cuisines, and also talking to people and everything. So that was a very fascinating journey to connect. And then basically I could be myself in the Northeast. If I was in, say, Northern India, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, any other part of India, I will have to conform to certain basic structures which defined my presumed gender, which is female. And then that liberty I had to be fluid in the Northeast. And that was something which inspired me to take up a research, my PhD research also in Nagaland. Instead of even my home state, I feel very restricted in my home state, Assam, very, very restricted. So I would rather prefer to work in the other states or engage with.
You have a large form. You have a large form. You can live in another room if you're not comfortable in the room that you're living right now. and like personally, I would be very happy to share space and resources. If you ever need.
Yeah.
In my capacity, in our capacity, of course. And I think you have pretty much sum up the next question that we want to talk about. How do you like to then reframe? I think you pretty much answered that as well. But in case you like to add on or, simplify.
I always used to feel that Northeast should be basically just like the United States of America, kind of another form of Northeastern republics of their own. That scope and space for being independent is so strong in the Northeast. And I love that dynamic sense of self-assertion which every state has, and which is now losing. Now we are losing that. Now we are just dying to be conforming with everything, like everything that defines what a Hindu Rashtra is. So we are dying to just identify and correlate with that kind of an identity out of convenience, out of fear, out of a conformist kind of politics, out of some sort of mutual benefits, mutual gains. We've just sold ourselves out. I feel that is where we stand currently.
At the same time, I think it's also brewing or rekindling alliances also, I think somewhere. Or I don't know, maybe the need has come to build bigger alliances. And honestly, this conversation somewhere also is part of that process where we want to build bigger alliances, not just among the Meitei folks, not just among the, Guwahati Assamese folks. We want to build bigger alliances. We want to build bigger conversations. Anything else you want to add, please feel free.
I think Northeast should be left as it is, as they are. I mean, enough of kind of extraction of resources, extraction of people. Okay, you have international looks, or you have high cheekbones, or you have this thing, so you can match like a Indonesian. So you get into the Indonesian restaurant, or you get into the Chinese restaurant. I mean, these things are the things which basically Indian psyche does, apart from the other kinds of discrimination which happens constantly that you have to keep on explaining that we are like this, we are like idli dosa ke liye to no explanation na. We know what idli is and what dosa is, but we have to keep explaining why we eat a pitha like this, or why we eat a gum roti like this, or why we have a Boraiguri like this. We have to keep on proving ourselves, I feel. And that I find it very restricting. And that exoticism attached to the region is something which needs to break down, because it's no fun being so exotic and being like a zoo animal, and we are exhibited everywhere and everything. We are people, we're human beings. We're like just anybody, right? Someone from Chhattisgarh, someone from Bombay, somebody from Chennai, anyone. So then even say Imphal or Jiribam or Tuensang or Kifri also should be accepted, or also should be feeling the same thing as a person from these places, right? So I feel, yeah.
Next, I speak with Viveka Gurung and Katien about their work, queer visibilities and mobilizations in Manipur, Darjeeling, Sikkim, and Nagaland. Viveka is a PhD scholar and educator based in Sikkim. Katien is a researcher and educator who lived in Sikkim and currently works and lives in Dimapur, Nagaland.
Hi, I am Katien. I identify as trans non-binary and my pronouns are they, them. Uh, by profession, I am a linguist. I currently teach at a college. For the last 5 years, I was based out of Gangtok, Sikkim, and currently I stay in Dimapur, Nagaland.
Hello, my name is Viveka Gurung. I am a member of Rainbow Hills Welfare Association Sikkim, and I identify as genderqueer. I currently serve as the treasurer in our NGO, and by profession, I am an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology, Government College, Tadu. Thank you.
Thank you for the introductions, Katien and Viveka. Now let's move right into our conversation.
Coming from LGBTQ histories in general, at somewhere at some point, I think in the struggle, visibility kind of came along. At least that's how I understand, like, that it came along at some point, in the struggle. Visibility came, it can be in the streets, it can be in the media, it can be in art circle, media representation, films, books, or just the streets, right in front of my house, our house. So I am obviously of the idea that visibility definitely comes at a point in our struggle. One can obviously fit in. Viveka, what do you think about it? I mean, we can talk about visibility if that's something that interests us.
Yeah, I think Viveka, we've had this conversation about in our workplaces, how do we dress, for instance, right? As non-binary people, how do we present ourselves? And considering that our workplaces are university spaces, or places where a lot of people see us, we are very visible that way. And we have talked about the challenges we face when deciding on how to present ourselves, right? For me, every single day going to college as a teacher now is a lot. At least half an hour every day goes in, oh my God, is it okay to wear this in front of the students? That kind of thing. And not because, I'm wearing some sort of skimpy outfit or something. It's just about what kind of judgment am I going to face? And at some level, I am not, it's not that I don't know that all these judgments are socially conditioned, and most probably most of the judgment is coming from within the internalized judgment and everything, but still it works. It is a real thing that we face. So I don't know, when I would think it is much more difficult for one transgender people who want to present in a totally opposite way than what the society perceives them, right? And equally, I think for other LGBT people who just want to express themselves in non-conforming ways, I think it's a difficult thing. I think it requires a lot of agency as well. Yes.
Visibility is a question, I think, which is also a lot more, in my opinion, relevant in places like Sikkim or Mizoram or Nagaland or Meghalaya, because Manipur, I think Manipur have had its own struggle, and I think we're now talking about rights here. in that sense. We're talking about legal rights, we're talking about institutional sensitization. And I'm not saying that we're ahead of the curve, but we surely have gained some pace, and thanks to the transgender community. I mean, their visibility played a very key role in the kind of placing where we are today. So, I mean, that way we owe a lot to them. And not to also forget that a lot of people died in the struggle. A lot of people paid their lives to let us live our life today. So that's also there. There's so much to obviously retrospect and learn from what has happened in the past, obviously. But every time I talk to people from Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, this same question comes around visibility and the anxiousness around it. Though there is a, let's say, at the level of the community, at the level of the town, or at the level of that area, there's this network. I think I'm more curious to know that way because I haven't lived in these places and I don't have that lived experience. I've lived only in Delhi and Manipur, where fairly the struggle have been challenging in its own way, but also it had avenues for self empowerment. It had avenues for expressions and collectivization, and also the fact that we are working with other community based, if not community led, but community based CBOs and organizations. So that also kind of play a role that way. HIV epidemic for sure also have acted as a catalyst of some kind, both a good one and a bad one. The good one is that it led us to, let's say, networking and community grassroots work of different kinds. On the other hand, we had to live off that stigma also. So all in all, I would be just more interested to learn more about one's lived experiences around visibility and invisibility.
In the issue of visibility, frankly, there are no answers. There are only questions. I think plethora of questions and very little answers. Everybody has a lot of questions around this. When it comes to visibility, like you have a question, let me also add a question because I don't have an answer to any of your questions. When we are talking about visibility, do we also talk about visual vocabulary? In language, we are talking about, we have terms, some terms, at least limited amount of terms to explain like what is what. In visibility, is there a vocabulary, like David, you were saying, who is the real trans? Who presents that vocabulary which other people understand for them to be perceived as trans? Like how I am presenting right now, there is no such term as visual vocabulary. I'm just trying to mince words to make sense of a lot of things. I am presenting to you right now. Looking at me, can you tell me if I am trans or not? What kind of vocabulary visually I should present to you for you to understand that I am trans? In that sense, who will be the real trans, or who is faking, or wannabe trans, has acquired a Western form of visual thing to present as trans, or has acquired a more ethnic indigenous way of? That is additional question. I would like to complicate this by not exactly a question. It is a question also, but another angle to it, which I'm very fascinated by, is even though we live in binaries, we think in binaries, there are always liminal spaces. There are those border between spaces, which is neither light nor dark, and where people can exist as neither that nor this. So I am somebody who routinely uses those liminal spaces. So much so that, like, visibly so, again, visibility, visibly so that people come to me and ask me, are you a boy or a girl? Right? So I'm saying I feel very good that there are these liminal spaces that I can use. But also then I also question myself when I see somebody who presents neither completely masked nor completely femme. And then what do I think about that? When I talk about, okay, I saw this person on the road today, to somebody, to my friend, to another trans person. Do I say he looked like a girl, or do I say she looked like a boy, or do I automatically, just because I am non-binary, do I say they were presenting non-conformists? For a long time, I was not using that language, that vocabulary, right? So that made me question myself.
Let me try reflecting on what you've said. I want to give examples, very short examples. Day before yesterday night, I was at a friend's house near Imphal. So this person is an artist and he has short hair, and his younger brother is getting married, and he's the elder brother, the eldest son. His mode of expression is very fluid. Sometimes he has slightly hoarser voice and like body language. Sometimes it's like completely mellow and soft. And he starts using lingos which is used among the trans community here, all kinds of trans community. So there's a word called bina or binau, means a fellow trans. So he started speaking on the phone about invitation card, like binau binau करके उसके मम्मी के सामने. And so he started expressing like that in the family only. He says bina and binau and all phone pay and ऐसे कर रहे हैं. I think that strikes me right now. I remember December last year, we did a community gathering, and 100 of us came like to the event. And there are like queer boys, gay boys in the hotel staff, among the hotel staff as well. They kept dropping in, they kept dropping out. So it was a full-fledged event, full-day event wherein there was drag show, dance shows, panel discussion, open mic. The event received a little bit of criticism from the Nupi Mandi front, which is Santa led, right? A little bit of criticism. So I remember this incident. This for me are examples of visibility. So it would have been very difficult for me to give definitions or explanations, but I thought, references to examples, which is also coming from lived experience. So that would give a picture of what I think of.
So what David you were saying, yes, very I understand where it is coming from. Like how you are visible, in what way or manner you are visible. One, collectively, right? Please correct me if I'm wrong. Collectively, as an organization that has a particular objective of, associating with the larger society. When you're talking about a small convention you had, and then as a close group partying, exercising just the freedom of expression and partying. So the manner in which you are
And the family space, yeah, where I
like
was
a
with
family
the
space,
uh,
recreation, let's say something, a visibility in recreational spaces and visibility in more goal-oriented, um, organized spaces. But what I am trying to hint at, okay, you are presenting your existence in a manner that your people in that geography would understand. Trans people presenting themselves in a way that the other people of the community or outside the community would understand that yes, I am trans. The visible visual cues, let's say, or very just like wearing short tops or putting scarf on your head. Those are, I think, visual cues of expressing yourself as trans and thereby adding to the visibility of the trans population. My question here is, if those visual cues of your presentation are not something that your community would understand. Let's say I'm speaking in Chinese, you don't understand Chinese. But when I speak in Chinese with people who understand Chinese, it's a different, the same language has different meaning. when I'm speaking with someone who understands it and speaking with someone who does not understand. So my visual cues of presenting as trans to people who understand the visual vocabulary again versus people who would not understand, let's say in Sikkim. I present myself as trans. What they expect from their vocabulary, visual vocabulary, is me to wear masculine clothes. If I'm a born female, so maybe present in more masculine way and sort of engage them into questioning if I'm male or female or this one is both. The terminology of the word trans is coming from English word. Similar words are there in Nepali also, in Sikkim, but I don't know if there is in the indigenous language, like let's say Bhutia, Limbu, or Lepcha. I don't know. My knowledge is limited. What are the words? So, if verbal cues are absent, okay, when you don't have words like trans or in those communities. So, my question here is when vocabulary, verbal vocabulary is present, visual vocabulary takes support from that. They help each other out. But when verbal vocabulary is absent, what kind of visual cues should a person present to be called as trans and you know be visible as trans with the agency, especially in Northeast, where we have more tribal population. There are more tribal population where maybe Western culture has not permeated so much. The vocabulary, visual and verbal, has not permeated so much. What kind of presentation trans people are giving there? I am talking about the organic one. If we didn't have this terminology, English verbal cue and the Western cue of drag race, let's say, how drag is becoming quite famous, in the indigenous, where we are, if our globalization mother, this is not quite possible, but if there are areas where we are still sanitized of these kind of ideas, what kind of presentation a trans person is giving? Do we have that kind of group?
While transgender is a gender, in its terminology, gender expression can be different, right? Gender
Yeah.
and gender expression can be completely different. Gender and the gender expression do not naturally fit into, let's say, more popular or mainstream or stereotypes that I've seen. So there is a lot of diversity that way within the community. Yes, I think I also recognize that there is a certain stereotype that has kind of been floating around that, okay, this is how our identities are expressed or marked out or defined. Like there is that I agree. Like for example, in the case of gay men, how gay men are like glamorous, if nothing else. Conscious of their body and skin and glamorous. So there have been stereotypes that have been floating around, but as the community network mobilization have increased over the years, which means more number of people are meeting together, going out together, and therein we're seeing more diversity from drag to more, let's say, indigenously identified, trans women, for example, or gender non-conforming people. That way, cis women who identify as queer, is now a very different, uh, you know, if not different, but something that we don't get to hear often. Also, so cis women who have come out as bisexual and queer women and lesbian, and how just by the way they dress up, you know, they're wearing same clothes as any other cis women, but just the fact that they speak about their sexual orientation, it gives a different impression now, just because of that verbal interaction, just because of that identity sexual orientation expression, right? Identity expression.
So the first thing that immediately came to mind when you were giving the example of the hotel hosting that event is that you're talking to one person who is in Sikkim where the queer association cannot rent an office space. That is not even not possible till now. Nobody's giving the space. And you're talking to another person who is in Nagaland where, as far as I know, there is no queer organization. There's no mobilization. That's a kind of
And
contrast that came to mind.
and exactly why I want to also kind of learn from my knowledge, also having spoken to people from those regions. So precisely why I wanted to hear from both of you about your context. I want to obviously understand a little more, and also not just for myself. I mean, the things that we are speaking today, what we all are sharing. I mean, it's in a way a queer history, right? It's our history that way, our history from different regions, from different communities, from different
Yeah.
contexts, and maybe this conversation is required. I don't know, required, important, elemental for what can happen in the future. If nothing, that community movement also born out of conversations.
As Katen was saying that Rainbow Hills is having problem establishing office, but Rainbow people, like the two arenas where we were discussing, in your place of family circle or your family circle and your let's say more organized agenda. In Rainbow Hills also, people, when it comes to parties, when it comes to meeting in cafes, talking in general, that is seen. Yeah, that maybe people don't know each other like a huge blanket, but there are sporadic groups, who meet and who hang around and like that. But when it comes to official stuff, because visibility is not for the people of community, for people outside the community, for them to perceive, so maybe 80% of which comes from the offices also, the governmental policies and all that. To be able to be visible officially in the state, people need to come and collectively do some kind of work, isn't it? That is more governmental, or let's say more governmental, more official and all that. There again, people don't turn up. I've seen, not just felt, but I've seen people come up for the entertainment thing, but they don't come for the official thing. That is where the numbers are lopsided. If you call for a party, you'll see 50 people. If you call for a meeting with maybe a social welfare officer, you'll have maybe 2 people turning up.
This actually made me process what I was trying to. I mean, I was just making an observation earlier, but now I've started to process because you brought this up. I think it's also about safety, because in what spaces are you safe to express yourself and be visible, right? When a person feels safe and where a person feels safe that they will be ready to be visible, to express themselves fully. But I, as an activist, I have always believed that it's not on somebody to push someone saying that it doesn't matter whether it's a safe space or not, you have to be visible. That I think is wrong. It is the same when it comes to the question of you have to come out, you are the scapegoat. So when you're asking about how ready are you to be visible, you are also asking something that you shouldn't be asking, I think. As activists, we can decide for ourselves how much visible we should be and how much we are ready to face the consequences of it. I think it's unethical to ask another person to disregard consequences and become visible or come out. That is why in a space like queer organization is not able to get an office. I mean, that is a reflection of what the society thinks of being queer and being organized as a queer organization. And in such a place, how can you ask people to be public as a queer person, right? And in a place where, because of whatever socio-political, economic reasons, people don't even want to potentially another queer person that I am also queer. Let's come together. Let's mobilize. That is not even there as far as I. can see here, I'm very new here, but still, that is a reflection of how safe they feel. I really think it's not on anyone to ask them to come forward and mobilize. It's up to people when they feel the need, when they feel safe to do so, when they feel it is required to do so, that people will come together and take action in whatever way.
Being on both sides, I remember 15 years back, I was discreet and I was on that side of the road wherein I saw this CBOs and queer groups and leaders and different faces who were so powerful and visible and strong, and I was so scared, and I would never been able to imagine to be on the other side, and I've been there as well, and now I'm on the other side wherein it feels so powerful to be visible and vocal and to be in the community and with the community. So I've been really on both sides. So having said that, it's been a really long journey that way, and I've had the support of a lot of people. I've also had a lot of self-conviction that way. So in a way, I think it would be amazing to think of, if this is our context, then how can this context, the context being the issue, but also the context giving rise to the solution itself. And for us, HIV was the problem, and it still is a problem. On the other hand, it also gave us that created those avenues to mobilize and slowly kind of redefine the narrative around HIV, which was more medical, more stigmatized, and branch out to different aspects of community.
In your geography, you have a point of origin of the wave of LGBT has a point of origin, which you can actually derive from the HIV epidemic. All the policies that were designed with HIV to locate MSM, if policies with HIV did not have to target the MSM and not acknowledge MSM, but only the cisgenders, maybe the wave would not have come. I don't know. In the context of Sikkim, we have not been able to set a discourse from such a point. We do have SAC, AIDS Control Society, Sikkim AIDS Control Society. Their policies, they don't include so much like the target population, MSM, or, as they say, the homo population. So maybe our point of origin can be really different. All geographies have different point of origins.
I have had a really lovely time chatting with you both, Vivek and Katyan. I learned a lot. It opened my eyes in different ways, and I hope there are ways in which we can take these conversations forward and further. Thank you for being here. Thanks for tuning into our conversations today. Watch out for our next episode, where Pavel will speak with Nilja, Romal, and Chani on the topics of Northeast and belongingness. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at the Jinky Homo Project. I hope you have a great day and a fantastic evening. See you.